But this one I saw on the internet. There's two moments where Caitlin was trying to get in, and Stephanie White was saying, no, 2 minutes, go sit back down or whatnot, right? So she got the thumbs up from somebody, right? Y'all saw that. She put a thumbs up. She put a thumb up, now she's coming over. But then you're going to see Stephanie White say, no, we're doing 2 minutes. Watch. 2 minutes. Now, but look what happened, man. Look at what happened, right? Let's look at Kelsey Mitchell. She finished with 33 minutes, which that's a solid spot. That's a solid spot for a player to play. 29 points, 9 for 18, 5 for 9 from the three, 100% from the free throw line. That's why it's important to allow these players to play, man. Get a feel for the game. This is what Caitlin Clark is talking about. You might start off slow, but then as the second half come in, you get a good feel. Now you're ready to drop bombs, which Kelsey Mitchell was doing. The step back, wing shots from the three, she was knocking them down. I don't even know why we ran away from that, honestly.
16 minutes. That's it. The Indiana Fever's most baffling night of the season. Let's set the scene. The Indiana Fever traveling to Los Angeles, facing a Sparks squad missing two of its biggest stars in Kelsey, Plum, and Brink. On paper, this is a game the Fever absolutely circle on the schedule as a must-win. And yet somehow, someway, Indiana walked out of Crypto.com Arena on the wrong end of a 106-92 blowout. But here is the part that will have your jaw on the floor. Their franchise cornerstone, the player averaging a career-best 21.2 points per game this season, was given exactly 16 minutes of floor time. Not 26, not even 20, 16. And the basketball world has been buzzing ever since. Caitlin Clark returned from a 2-game absence due to a back injury she sustained on June 24th against the Phoenix Mercury. She logged just 16 minutes against the Sparks, finishing with 9 points on 4-for-12 shooting, adding 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 turnovers on the stat sheet. But those raw numbers don't even begin to tell the real story of what went down that night. Coach Stephanie White's strategy was to deploy Clark in roughly 3-minute intervals throughout the game, brief bursts of action followed by extended stints on the bench. The approach did not work, and it left Clark herself openly acknowledging the obvious after the final buzzer. Clark confirmed after the contest that the limited playing time and the 3-minute rotation pattern made it extremely difficult to find any kind of stride, stating that it is really hard when you are playing 3 minutes, then coming out, then 3 minutes, then 3 minutes, then back on the bench. Now here is what makes this so much more layered than a typical load management debate. This is not the first time Caitlin Clark has been placed in this exact situation, and it is absolutely not the first time she has made her feelings on the subject crystal clear. She has openly expressed her disdain for minutes restrictions in the past, previously stating she would rather not play at all than operate under one. She also confirmed after the Sparks game that the restriction and rotation pattern were entirely the coaching staff's decision, not hers. Read that again. The player did not want this. She told the organization that, and they did it anyway. White explained her reasoning post-game, pointing to Clark's conditioning as the primary concern after nearly 2 weeks away from competitive game action rather than any lingering doubt about her skill level. That is a fair point on the surface. Coming back from an injury layoff and jumping straight into 30-plus minutes of WNBA basketball is genuinely risky. Nobody is disputing that. But the method used to protect her that night raised serious, legitimate questions that deserve honest answers. If you have been following WNBA updates for a while, you already know we hold this coaching staff accountable when the decisions don't add up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and join the conversation, because we are just getting started. Here is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. While Clark was being cycled in and out in 3-minute windows, her teammate Kelsey Mitchell was given an entirely different level of trust by the same coaching staff. Mitchell logged 33 minutes of floor time. In the first half alone, she struggled significantly, shooting just 3 for 10 from the field with only 1 3-pointer falling through the net. By any standard, that is a rough opening half. But Coach White kept her on the floor, stayed patient, and let her work through it naturally. The results of that trust? Mitchell led Indiana with 29 points, turning in a sharp performance that included efficient shooting and consistent production from beyond the arc. She caught fire in the second half and delivered the only real bright spot in an otherwise forgettable evening for the Fever. The lesson practically writes itself. When you allow elite players to find their rhythm, they figure it out. When you yank them every 3 minutes, nobody finds anything. Now, to be fair, there is important context to acknowledge here. For Indiana, the stated priority was not what Clark could produce in 16 minutes against the Sparks. It was making sure she would be fully prepared to carry a significantly heavier workload during the second half of the season when the games carry far greater weight. That is a legitimate organizational perspective, and it deserves to be on the table. The Fever dropped to 12-9 with the loss, and White's next move was to sit Clark entirely against the Phoenix Mercury the following night while Aaliyah Boston returned to the lineup. But here is the central tension that the organization has not fully resolved. Clark told her trainers after the game that while the result was painful, she considered her physical response a genuine positive, essentially treating how her body felt as a victory in itself. She felt great. She said so explicitly. And if that is her honest assessment after 16 minutes of 3-minute intervals, it raises a real question about whether the extreme restriction was calibrated correctly in the first place. The Los Angeles Sparks were playing shorthanded that night, taking the floor without 2 of their marquee players. Indiana spent the evening overmanaging its biggest asset against a depleted opponent and still got blown out. The Sparks shot the ball at an efficient clip all game long, and the Fever's defense was not sharp enough to compensate for an offense that never found any cohesion. And cohesion is a real issue when your primary playmaker is operating on a 3-minute rotation. The timing between Clark and her teammates was visibly off throughout her limited stints. Plays broke down at inopportune moments. Chemistry requires repetition, and repetition requires actually being on the floor. When a point guard is constantly transitioning from bench mode to game mode and back again, the on-court communication with her teammates suffers in ways that do not always show up cleanly in the box score. Heading into the game, Clark had been averaging a career-high 21.2 points per game in just under 31 minutes of action per night. This is a player operating at the absolute peak of her professional development, playing the best basketball of her career by measurable standards. The version of Caitlin Clark that exists right now in 2026 is genuinely dangerous, and managing her into irrelevance against a short-handed opponent is the kind of decision that lingers in the minds of fans and players alike. There is a bigger picture here that goes beyond just one frustrating loss. The Fever have remained committed to the long view with their franchise star. Clark has already appeared in more games this season than she managed during her injury-shortened 2025 campaign, and the organization has been deliberately cautious every step of the way. That caution has its roots in legitimate concern. Nobody wants to watch Clark spend extended time on the sideline dealing with a back problem that keeps flaring up. The Fever's medical staff is not operating in bad faith. But elite franchise players remember how they are handled in these moments. They notice when their own feedback is overridden. They notice the sideline dynamics. They notice the body language of a coaching staff that is locked into a plan even when that plan is visibly not producing results on the floor. The relationship between a star player and her head coach lives and dies on mutual trust. And trust is something that has to be consistently demonstrated, not just occasionally mentioned in press conferences. Looking ahead, White confirmed that Clark will be available for the Fever's road finale against the Las Vegas Aces, though she will again operate under a minute's restriction in the range of 20 to 25 minutes as Indiana continues its gradual return plan. That is progress from 16, and it signals the organization is aware of where the line was drawn too tightly against the Sparks. But the broader question of how Clark and the coaching staff navigate this ongoing tension between competitive fire and medical caution is one that will follow this franchise for the remainder of the season. Here is the real question for every Indiana Fever fan watching this situation develop. If Caitlin Clark comes out against the Aces and says her body is right, her back feels strong, and she wants full run, does this coaching staff trust her to know what her own body is capable of? Or does this organization continue managing her like something fragile, even as she is in the middle of the best scoring season of her WNBA career? This conversation is not close to finished. Drop your take in the comments right now. Are you with the coaching staff on this one, or do you think the Fever are overthinking it? And if you want every angle of every major WNBA storyline this season covered the right way, subscribe to WNBA Updates. We are here all season long, and this ride is far from over.